This special meeting of the School Board of the City of Virginia Beach is now in session. This is our formal meeting format. At this time, I ask that my colleagues and everyone in attendance please silence your electronic devices and phones. I ask my colleagues to acknowledge their presence on the voting board. Please note that Mrs. Holtz is not here this evening due to illness. At this time, I'm asking everyone to join me in a moment of silence. Please rise as you are able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Under the adoption of the agenda, I would like to switch 4 and 5. If there's no objection. The chair will entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Mrs. Melnick has moved. Mrs. Riggs has seconded. The voting board is open. The chair will entertain a motion to accept a motion of the written decision of Michael Mullins to decline the appointment to the District 3 Rose Hall vacancy. The motion is made by Mrs. Felton, seconded by Mrs. Melnick.
Hold a
And
second.
the motion is as stated.
Wait.
Can you? I know. She's getting ready to read it.
I move that the school board accept the May 22nd, 2019 decision of Michael Mullins to decline appointment to the District 3 Rose Hall School Board member position, and that the school board rescind the May 21st, 2019 resolution appointing Michael Mullins to that position.
It was moved and seconded by Mrs. Melnick and seconded by was moved by Mrs. Melnick, seconded by Mrs. Felton. Is there discussion? Mr. Edwards.
I'd ask our attorney, this is simply an appropriate protocol motion that if he declines, we couldn't ask him to serve anyway. Is that correct?
Well, he was appointed, so
But if he declines to take the oath, then he wouldn't. He's not in office yet. Is
but
that
he's
correct?
still appointed, so he technically was appointed to the position. He's just choosing not to accept it. But he was appointed, so you do need to. You can accept his decision not to do it, but you do need to pull your resolution back.
Okay. I mean, I'm fully going to support it, but it's always kind of nice to know why we're doing something. And well, I think we know why, but.
He didn't qualify for the position because he did take the final action for it, but part of the reason he's not qualifying is because he's choosing not to go forward.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, the voting board is open. The motion has passed. At this time, Ms. Melnick, would you read the motion for closed?
The way this is written, I always have to think about this for a second. I move that we recess into a closed session pursuant to the exemptions from open meetings allowed by Section 2.2-3711, Part A, paragraphs 1 and 7 of the Code of Virginia 1950, as amended for personnel matters, discussion of or consideration of interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A1, namely to discuss qualifications of candidates for appointment to the District 3 Rose Hall vacancy on the school board. And legal matters, consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members or consultants pertaining to actual or probable litigation where such consultation or briefing in open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the public body pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A7, namely to discuss legal issues related to the appointment process.
It has been moved. Is there a second? Mrs. Riggs has seconded. Voting board is open. Yes? Ms. Manning?
So I spoke with our attorney about an hour ago, and based on my conversation with her, there's no need to go into closed session for legal reasons, and I cannot support going into closed session to discuss this.
Ms. Melnick?
When we started this process, we decided as a group that this was going to be considered a personnel matter and that this entire process would take place in closed session. We started it in closed session, and I'm asking that we finish it in closed session. Thank you.
Mr. Edwards, I spoke with you earlier about this. Would you like to comment?
Well, I think, the board under state statutes is permitted, if we're discussing citizens that are contemplating public service in closed session, and I think that's appropriate. Whether or not the legal consultation in terms of process and potential legal issues is appropriately included in the closed call, I would not venture a comment on that. But since we still have candidates to discuss, I think it's appropriate to be closed.
If I can clarify, Madam Chairman, I did not say there was no reason to go in. My point is you could go in because it was personnel matters or legal matters, or you could discuss an open session. It's a decision that the board can make for itself.
Okay. Ms. Weems? And then I got you.
Yes, I would like to discuss the process in open session so that our community knows what's going on. We need to be transparent. There's a lot of stuff going on that nobody knows about. And I think we need to really be clear on the process. We've got several options of if we're going to start completely over, if we're going to vote tonight, or are we going to vote next week, and are we going to get more public input? I mean, there's a lot of things that we need to discuss, and I just think that we need to discuss that part publicly, and so we can be transparent and so that everybody is on the same page. So I ask my colleagues to discuss the process in public where it should be. Thank you.
Ms. Hughes?
I echo a lot of what Ms. Weems is saying. I do feel from a lot of what I've seen on social media, texts I've been getting, phone calls I've been getting, we are losing public confidence, and it does not behoove the school board to do more of this behind the scenes.
Ms. Manning?
So this was an emergency meeting that was called. And, I understand the emergency meeting to accept Mr. Mullen's decision, and I believe that needed to be done. But we have until June 4th to make this decision. So I don't think that it would be classified as an emergency to move forward and take action today. So I have some concerns regarding open meeting laws. Ms. Linetti, if you would like to address my concerns on that as to whether or not going into closed session for an emergency meeting that may not technically be an emergency is an appropriate thing to do.
I think you can decide for yourselves whether this is an emergency or not. We didn't put it on as one way or the other. It was you would discuss how you would handle the vote. So the board itself can decide how you want it, whether you want to do a vote tonight or whether you want to do it at some other time period. But it was appropriate for discussion this evening.
Can you confirm that the statute allows us until June 4th to make the decision?
You have 45 days from April 22nd to fill the vacancy. That would run on June 4th. So it would need to be done before that time. The vacancy someone needs to be appointed. If you do not appoint, then it will switch to the circuit court to make the appointment.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Edwards?
I'd propose a substitute motion, which is inclusive of everything in the main motion, but strikes the reason for going closed relative to the discussion with the attorney on legal matters relative to the process. I agree with the comments that have been indicated. Yeah, the process itself, I think we owe it to and I would commit to certainly making sure nobody leaves here tonight not knowing what the process is, but whether or not, the process is going to be a variable based on what I would propose would be a closed discussion of the merits of the candidates that are still appropriate applicants for the position.
So if we're going to be speaking about the merits of the candidates,
I think we need to see if there's a second on that and then discuss.
is there a second to Mr. Edwards? Carolyn?
Question, so I'll wait for the second and then ask the question.
You second it? Okay, Ms.
My
Wright?
question is just to clarify, is Mr. Edwards suggesting just open session for the process and closed for the discussion on individual candidates?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Ms. Manning?
I guess I'd like some further clarification about what discussion on candidates entails. Can you clarify your meaning of that?
Mr. Edwards?
Well, it's sort of like restating the obvious. The candidates all bring strengths and weaknesses to the board, which I believe the board should evaluate and use in their determination of the most appropriate person for the position.
All right, Ms. Wright?
Yes, I see no reason to change the original reason of why we went into closed to discuss individual candidates, to offer them the same confidentiality we do employees and otherwise. So for me, this is an extension of what we were doing yesterday, of the reasons why we chose closed yesterday.
Mrs. Hughes?
It would seem that discussing the qualification of candidates in this forum when somebody is applying for a position isn't beyond what you would be discussing about candidates during an election for the position, and that's all over town in a very public manner.
Mrs. Manning?
I agree with Ms. Hughes, and I think when we made the decision to treat this as a personnel matter, it was for interview purposes. That's what I voted on, and the discussions associated with the interview process. I think we're at a different situation right now because none of us anticipated that this would happen. So I don't think tying the two together is appropriate, and I believe that the public and the citizens want this to be an open process. And I think it should all be an open process unless our attorney states that there's a litigation matter that we must go into closed session for.
Well, I anticipate that we will be discussing some of the things that were brought out in the interviews, and so therefore I'm also in favor of going into closed for that part of the conversation. So the motion that's on the floor right now is a substitute motion. Mr. Edwards, correct? Could you state it one more time, please? Basically, well,
It would be
basically,
deleting the portion that, I don't have.
Okay, so the portion that he wants to delete is the legal matter part, which is consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members are consultants pertaining to actual or probable litigation where such consultation or briefing in open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the public body pursuant to section 2.2-3711A, namely to discuss legal issues related to the appointment process.
I'm uncomfortable with that because there could be something that comes up in closed that we need our legal attorney there for.
Correct. That's why.
So I'm not in favor of this substitute motion. So, seeing no other discussion, the voting board is open. This is on the substitute, correct?
Correct.
So 6 people have said no. Now we're back to the main motion to go into closed as it was read originally.
Sure. I motion that we recess into a closed section pursuant to the exemptions from open meetings allowed by Section 2.2-3711, Part A, paragraphs 1 and 7 of the Code of Virginia 1950, as amended for A, personnel matters, discussion of or consideration of interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A. 1, namely to discuss qualifications of candidates for appointment to the District 3 Rose Hall vacancy on the school board. And B, legal matters, consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members or consultants pertaining to actual or probable litigation, where such consultation or briefing in open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the public body pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A7, namely to discuss legal issues related to the appointment process.
Is there a second? Again, well, actually, we don't need a second again because we've already got a second, but seeing no discussion,
Just
any other
comment,
discussion? Ms. Weems?
comment. I just urge my colleagues to keep this process transparent and in full view of our public, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others?
And I would just like to reiterate the point that we had some very lengthy, in-depth conversations last night in relation to the interviews. And in fairness, I do believe that those same conversations could come out here. And it's not that I don't want to do this in public, but I think we owe it to the candidates that we finish this process the way we started.
Ms. Hughes?
Are either of the candidates objecting to there being an open meeting?
Well, one of them is here, but the other one is not present at the time. Ms. Manning?
I believe we owe it to the public to make sure that all of this is open and transparent and that they know who is being elected to this seat and that they know everything possible about that person that's going to be elected.
Well, that's true, but sometimes it's our opinions about things. So, Ms. Melnick?
Then we should have done it. We should have done it in an open forum from the very beginning, and the interview should have occurred in public. I agree. But we all voted not to do that, and so we have what we have now, and we need to finish the job, and that's what's fair. And it's not fair to bring the public in for only half of the conversation, and that's what would be occurring if we didn't finish this properly.
Mrs. Manning?
I admit that this was a mistake to not make it public in the first place, and I admit to my mistake.
Thank you.
Seeing no further comments, the voting board is open. We will be into close, and we are going into the room next door, into the school conference room next door. Hone, the vote on the remaining two finalists until May 28th, 2018. Is there a motion? Mrs. Manning has made the motion, seconded by Mrs. Hughes. Is there discussion? Seeing none, the voting board is open. The motion is passed. We will be voting on that action on May 28th. Next on the agenda is adjournment. Do we need to discuss with the public further process?
Do you want to discuss the process? You may need to amend your agenda to clarify that.
I agree. Right now it says adjournment, so. Do I see? Ms. Weems?
Yeah, I think that we need to amend it because I thought that's what we were doing is talking about the process so that everybody would know. So I move that we add another item to discuss the process and what happens now.
So it's been moved and seconded that we amend our agenda to add an item to discuss the process. Any discussion? Voting board is open. The motion is passed. At this time, I'm going to open this up for discussion for the process. Ms. Linetti, would you like to lead us in this?
The vacancy was declared by the circuit court to be the process to begin the filling of the appointment to fill the vacancy by the court was set on April 22nd. You had 45 days in which to do that, so that would end on June 4th. So it's necessary for you to make an appointment by that date. We already scheduled by the resolution that you initially adopted as to what the process would be. You have scheduled May 28th as one of the potential voting dates. You just confirmed that there. So your intent is that you will come back on the 28th and vote. You possibly might need a closed session depending on some if there's further discussion on this matter. Otherwise, you will put it to a vote on the agenda on May 28th. But again, if you don't for any reason on May 28th, it must be done before June 4th.
Is there any other questions, comments? Mrs. Manning?
Well, and just to clarify, there will be an agenda item on May 28th for us to vote on the appointment of a new school board member. And at that time, we can also take public comment.
It should be an action item, which would allow for agenda item comments.
Correct. Mrs. Weems?
Just wanted to make clear for the public, the reason why we're postponing this for a week is just to get legal documentation and proof of both candidates' residences in Rose Hall. Thank you.
Any other comments, clarifications? Seeing none, we are adjourned.